He's caught in a battle within himself, a silent war between his ego and his emotions. On one side, there's the part of him that wants to reach out. It's there, whispering, urging him to send that message. The feelings haven't disappeared. The memories still linger. He still thinks about you, still feels that pull, still wonders what you're doing. The urge to check on you, to reconnect, to see if you still care. It's real. It's persistent. But it's being drowned out by something stronger, something he can't ignore. His ego, his pride, his fear. The ego is a powerful force. It's the voice that tells him to stay in control, to keep his power, to avoid appearing weak. It convinces him that reaching out first means surrendering, that it's a loss, that it's a sign of desperation. He may want to text you more than anything, but his ego refuses to let him. It's the same ego that whispers doubts into his mind, replaying old conversations, reminding him of the last time he reached out and didn't get the response he expected. Maybe he's been hurt before. Maybe he's conditioned himself to believe that expressing emotions is a risk, a vulnerability that could be exploited. Maybe he thinks that by not texting, he's protecting himself from rejection, from looking foolish, from feeling like he's chasing someone who no longer wants him. And then there's fear. Fear of what you might say, fear of what you might not say, fear of how he will feel if he gets no response at all. What if you've moved on? What if you don't care anymore? What if the power dynamic shifts and he's the one left waiting, staring at his phone, wondering why you haven't replied? That fear is paralyzing. It stops him from making a move even when his heart is screaming for it. For some, this battle is subconscious. They don't even realize they're struggling between these two forces. They justify their silence with excuses, telling themselves they're just giving it time, waiting for the right moment, staying in control. They convince themselves that if they hold back, if they resist the urge to reach out, eventually you'll be the one to break first. That's the game their ego plays. It thrives on the idea that the one who cares less holds the power. It feeds off the notion that withholding affection creates mystery, intrigue, and desire. But deep down, beneath all the pride, beneath all the hesitation is emotion. Raw, unfiltered emotion. He feels something, whether he admits it or not. If he didn't, there would be no struggle. The fact that he's resisting the urge to text means that the urge exists. It means something inside him is still attached, still questioning, still wondering if there's a door left open. This internal conflict plays out in his mind like a loop. One moment he thinks about texting. He might even type something out, maybe a simple hey, maybe something longer. But before he can hit send, the voice of his ego creeps in. It reminds him of the risks, the consequences, the loss of control. It warns him not to give in, not to make the first move. He erases the message. He puts the phone down. He convinces himself that if he waits long enough, you'll be the one to reach out instead. That way he keeps his pride intact. But what he doesn't realize is that this very struggle is a sign of emotional attachment. If he truly didn't care, if he had truly moved on, there would be no hesitation, no mental back and forth, no internal debate. Indifference doesn't battle with itself. Indifference doesn't hesitate. The mere fact that he has to fight the urge to text you means you still occupy space in his mind. But the weight of his ego keeps him stuck, trapped in this loop of wanting and withholding, desiring and resisting. For some men, this struggle is even more complicated because it's not just about pride or fear. It's about conditioning. Society teaches men from a young age to suppress emotions, to avoid looking vulnerable, to equate emotional expression with weakness. Many have internalized the belief that showing interest first makes them seem needy or desperate. So even when they feel something deeply, they hold it in, convinced that silence makes them more desirable, more powerful, more in control. Then there are the ones who are waiting for you to make the move first, waiting for a sign that it's safe, that they won't be ignored or rejected. They tell themselves they're being patient, that they're just playing it cool, but in reality, they're stuck. They want to reconnect, but they're paralyzed by the thought of what might happen if they take that step and don't get the outcome they expect. This entire cycle is exhausting, and most of the time it leads to nothing but regret. Regret for the messages they never sent. Regret for the conversations they avoided. Regret for the moments they let slip away, all because they let their ego overpower their heart. But by the time they realize this, it's often too late. The opportunity is gone. The person they wanted to reach out to has moved on. The door they thought would always be open is now closed. And so the pattern repeats. He convinces himself that he made the right choice by not texting, that he played it smart, that he didn't let his emotions take over. But late at night, when everything is quiet and there's no one to impress, the truth settles in. He still wants to text you. He still wonders. He still feels the pull, but he won't do it because his ego won. Again, silence has a way of speaking louder than words, carrying messages that words often fail to deliver. It creates an unspoken tension, an invisible force that lingers between two people, filling the gaps where conversations used to be. It leaves space for doubt, for questioning, for overanalyzing every moment leading up to it. When someone who used to talk to you suddenly stops, the absence of their words becomes deafening. You find yourself searching for meaning in the silence, wondering what it is supposed to tell you. Is it indifference? Is it hesitation? Is it regret? When someone doesn't reach out, the mind instinctively seeks answers. You start replaying old conversations, dissecting every interaction, looking for a clue, an indication of why they have chosen not to speak. You wonder if it's something you did, something you said, something you failed to notice. The uncertainty breeds frustration because the human mind craves closure. It wants a definitive answer, a resolution, a conclusion that makes sense. But silence offers none of that. Silence only leaves you with your thoughts, your emotions, your interpretations of what it could mean. But silence is not always a sign of disinterest. Sometimes it is hesitation. Sometimes it is self-doubt. Sometimes it is someone waiting just like you are, unsure of what the next step should be. People assume that not texting means not caring, but in many cases the opposite is true. The very fact that someone chooses to remain silent often means they are thinking, considering, debating whether they should say something or hold back. It means they are aware of the situation, that they have thought about it, that they are not indifferent. Indifference is effortless. Hesitation takes effort. The struggle to text, the urge to reach out, and the resistance that follows, that is not the behavior of someone who doesn't care. That is the behavior of someone who is caught between their emotions and their fears. But the question is not why they are silent. The real question is why their silence affects you so much. The more you focus on their lack of communication, the more power you give it. The more you sit in frustration, the more you feed into the cycle of waiting, hoping, expecting something that may never come. It is easy to become trapped in the illusion that if they cared, they would reach out. But people operate based on their own internal battles, not your expectations. They are not sitting there thinking about how their silence is affecting you. They are too consumed by their own thoughts, their own hesitations, their own unresolved emotions. Silence creates a psychological void. It forces the brain to fill in the blanks, to create a narrative that may not even be true. You begin to assume the worst, to interpret their lack of action as rejection, as proof that you do not matter. But silence does not always mean what you think it does. Sometimes silence is a defense mechanism. Sometimes it is a form of self-protection. Sometimes it is their way of maintaining control, of not showing too much, of keeping themselves from appearing vulnerable. But the more you try to analyze their silence, the deeper you fall into the trap of emotional dependency. The moment you start needing their response to feel at peace, you give away your power. You allow their actions or lack thereof to dictate your emotions. You become reactive rather than proactive, waiting instead of moving forward. The reality is, if someone wants to reach out, they will. If they are choosing not to, that is still an action. It is still a decision. And instead of trying to understand their silence, you should be paying attention to your own. Why do you feel the need for an explanation? Why do you need reassurance from someone who has chosen not to speak? Silence is a lesson in control. Control over your own emotions, control over your reactions, control over the way you interpret someone else's inaction. It teaches you that not every unanswered text requires an explanation, that not every silence needs to be filled. It forces you to sit with discomfort, to learn how to navigate uncertainty without losing yourself in it. It is in these moments of quiet that you are given an opportunity to shift the focus back to yourself. Instead of wondering why they are silent, ask yourself why it matters so much. Instead of seeking validation through their words, find validation within. The need for a response, the need for an explanation, the need for closure, these are all ways in which we try to control outcomes. But the moment you stop seeking external confirmation and start trusting yourself, their silence loses its power. It no longer dictates your emotions. It no longer holds you hostage. It simply becomes what it is, an absence of words, nothing more, nothing less. And once you realize that silence is not rejection, that it is not a measure of your worth, that it does not hold the power you once thought it did, everything changes. The mind is a battlefield where emotions and logic are constantly at war. He thinks about texting you. The thought crosses his mind more times than he'd ever admit. His fingers hover over the screen, maybe even typing out a message only to delete it before pressing send. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't want to. The problem is the thoughts racing through his mind, the questions he can't silence, the uncertainty that paralyzes him. What if you don't respond? What if you take hours or even days to reply? What if you've already moved on? And his message serves as nothing more than a reminder of the past, a past you no longer care about. His mind replays these questions like a broken record, making the simple act of sending a text feel like a gamble with his dignity at stake. The fear of looking foolish, of reaching out only to be met with silence or a lukewarm response, keeps him from making a move. The truth is, he has built up this moment in his mind. He has imagined different scenarios, played out different versions of how this could go, and in each version where he ends up feeling rejected, his hesitation grows stronger. The brain has a way of protecting itself from pain. It anticipates hurt before it even happens, sometimes exaggerating the risk to an extreme level. He convinces himself that not texting you is the safer option, the smarter decision. That if he just waits, if he holds out a little longer, maybe you'll be the one to reach out first. Maybe then he won't have to face the possibility of rejection. There's also the battle between emotion and logic. Emotion tells him to text you, to just say something, to break the silence and see where things stand. Logic, however, steps in and reminds him of the last conversation, of the last time he reached out first, of the way things ended. It reminds him that if you wanted to talk, you'd be the one texting him. Logic tells him that by staying quiet, he's maintaining control. He's not giving away his power. He's keeping the upper hand. But emotion doesn't care about control. Emotion just wants to feel something again. This conflict leaves him stuck in place, caught between wanting to reach out and refusing to do so. He checks his phone more often than he'd like to admit, hoping to see your name appear on the screen, hoping that you'll make the first move so that he doesn't have to. Because as much as he wants to text you, he wants even more to know that you still care. That's what this really comes down to, the need for reassurance. The need to know that he's not the only one still thinking about this. Pride plays his role as well. If he texts you first, what does that say about him? Does it make him look weak? Does it make him seem desperate? He doesn't want to be the one chasing. He doesn't want to feel like he's the only one who still cares. His ego tells him that the moment he texts you, he loses power. And for some people, the need for power outweighs the need for connection. He'd rather sit in silence and risk feeling exposed. But the irony is, the more he tries to suppress the urge to text, the stronger it becomes. He distracts himself, scrolling through social media, keeping busy with work, surrounding himself with other people, anything to drown out the thoughts of you. But late at night, when everything is quiet, when there's nothing left to distract him, the thoughts come rushing back. That's when the urge to text you is strongest. That's when he debates it the most. But even then, something stops him. Maybe he doesn't want to look like he's been thinking about you. Maybe he doesn't want to give you the satisfaction of knowing he still cares. Maybe he's afraid of opening the door again, afraid that talking to you will only lead to more confusion, more disappointment, more unanswered questions. Sometimes not texting feels like self-preservation, like protecting himself from falling back into something that hurt him before. And there's another possibility: he's waiting for the perfect excuse. He doesn't want to send a random message out of nowhere. He wants a reason, an opportunity, something to justify breaking the silence. Maybe a memory pops up that he can casually reference. Maybe a mutual friend mentions your name. Maybe he stumbles upon something that reminds him of you. But if no such opportunity presents itself, he convinces himself it's better to stay quiet. This hesitation is not a lack of feeling. It's a result of overthinking. The fear of rejection, the battle betrayed in vulnerability, the uncertainty of how you'll respond, all of it creates a mental block that keeps him from taking action. So he does nothing. He waits. He lets the days pass. He tells himself that if you really wanted to talk to him, you'd be the one to send a message first. But even as he tells himself that, he can't shake the feeling that he's missing out on something. That maybe, just maybe, if he could silence his thoughts for just a moment and follow his heart instead of his mind, he'd be able to send the message he's been dying to send. The mind is constantly searching for answers, especially when faced with silence. When someone doesn't text, the first instinct is to question why. The overthinking begins, filling the void with assumptions, possibilities, and scenarios that may not even be real. Every time the phone is checked, every time a notification appears that isn't from them, it fuels the cycle of self-doubt and frustration. The uncertainty becomes louder than logic. And instead of accepting the situation for what it is, the mind starts to create explanations that are often rooted in insecurity. One of the most dangerous things about overanalyzing is that it tricks the brain into believing that thinking more will lead to clarity. The mind runs through every possible reason for the silence, dissecting past conversations, looking for hidden meanings, searching for signs that might have been missed. Did something go wrong? Was it something said? Was it something left unsaid? The mind does not like unresolved questions, and when there are no clear answers, it creates its own. These imagined explanations become so convincing that they start to feel like reality. The problem is that overanalyzing does not change the situation. It does not make them text back. It does not provide closure. Instead, it keeps the mind stuck in a loop, reliving moments that no longer exist, trying to solve a puzzle that may not even need solving. It places all the focus on them, on their actions, on their thoughts, on their possible reasons, rather than shifting the focus back to what is within control. The more attention given to their silence, the more power it gains. The more energy spent on wondering what they are thinking, the less energy is available for personal growth and peace of mind. The human brain is wired to seek patterns. When something happens, especially something unexpected, the mind immediately tries to connect it to something familiar. If they used to text every day, but now they don't, the mind wants to know why. If they were interested before, but now they seem distant, the mind searches for a reason. And when no clear answer is found, it fills in the blanks with assumptions. Maybe they lost interest. Maybe they found someone else. Maybe they are testing to see who cares more. These thoughts, once planted, start to grow, influencing emotions and actions in ways that can become destructive. One moment of overthinking can turn into hours of mental exhaustion. A single unanswered text can spiral into questioning self-worth, doubting past interactions, and replaying conversations that have already happened. The mind starts searching for clues that may not even exist, analyzing the tone of their last message, rereading old texts to see if there was a shift, comparing how they used to communicate versus now. But no amount of analyzing changes the reality of the present moment. No amount of dissecting their behavior will make them reach out any sooner. Sometimes people overanalyze because they are looking for control. If they can just understand the reason, if they can figure out what went wrong, maybe they can fix it. Maybe they can say the right thing to bring them back. Maybe they can do something to make the silence go away. But the truth is, control is an illusion when it comes to other people's actions. No matter how much effort is put into understanding their behavior, the decision to reach out still belongs to them. No amount of thinking can force someone to do something they are not ready or willing to do. Overanalyzing also has a way of distorting reality. The longer the mind lingers on the situation, the bigger it starts to seem. A simple act of someone not texting back turns into a sign of rejection. A delay in response becomes evidence that they don't care. The mind starts attaching meaning to things that may not even be intentional. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe they got caught up in something and forgot. Maybe it has nothing to do with how they feel at all. But overanalyzing takes the unknown and turns it into something personal. It creates unnecessary pain from things that may not even be real. The cycle of overanalyzing is exhausting. It steals the ability to be present, to focus on things that actually matter. It drains energy that could be used for something productive. It keeps emotions tied to something that is out of control. The reality is, if someone wants to text, they will. If they are not texting, there is a reason. Whether that reason is simple or complex does not change the fact that sitting in confusion will not bring answers. The mind can be the biggest enemy when it is left unchecked. It will create fears where there are none. It will turn silence into rejection. It will take something small and make it feel like the end of the world. But not every thought deserves attention. Not every unanswered text is a statement about worth. The more energy is spent on overanalyzing, the more power is given away. The key is learning to take control back, not by seeking answers from someone else, but by deciding to let go of the need to know everything. Attachment to an outcome is one of the greatest sources of emotional suffering. The moment expectations are placed on how someone should act, respond, or engage, power is handed over to them. When there is an expectation for them to text first, to reach out, to acknowledge something, and they don't, disappointment sets in. That disappointment is not just about their silence, it's about the unmet expectation, the gap between what was hoped for and what actually happened. The mind struggles to accept that gap, replaying the situation over and over, trying to make sense of why things didn't go the way they were supposed to. This attachment to an outcome creates unnecessary pain. It places emotional well-being in the hands of another person. It makes happiness dependent on whether or not they reach out, on whether or not they respond in a certain way. This is why the silence feels so loud, because it contradicts what was expected. The mind assumed that they would care enough to text back, that they would make an effort, that they would acknowledge the connection. But when they don't, it feels personal. It feels like rejection. It feels like something is wrong. The reality is, expectations are often built on assumptions rather than facts. The assumption that they would text because they used to. The assumption that they feel the same way. The assumption that they are thinking about the situation in the same way. These assumptions create a false sense of security. And when reality does not match them, it creates emotional turmoil. But the truth is, people operate from their own perspective, not from the expectations placed on them. They have their own reasons, their own emotions, their own inner conflicts. They are not living according to the script written for them. Letting go of attachment does not mean not caring. It does not mean shutting down emotions or pretending that the silence doesn't matter. It means understanding that happiness should not be dependent on what someone else does or doesn't do. It means shifting the focus from trying to control their response to controlling personal reactions. Instead of asking, why haven't they texted? The question should be, why am I allowing this to affect me so much? That shift in focus brings the power back where it belongs. The struggle with attachment is that it feeds off the need for validation. If they text first, it means they care. If they don't, it must mean they don't. This black and white thinking creates unnecessary suffering. because it places self-worth in the hands of someone else's decision. But their actions are not a measure of value. Their silence is not a reflection of personal worth. Letting go of attachment means recognizing that emotions should not be dictated by external factors. It means refusing to give someone else control over inner peace. The need for closure is another way attachment keeps people stuck. The idea that they owe an explanation, that they should have said something instead of disappearing, that their silence is unfair, it all stems from a desire to understand. But not everyone will provide closure. Not everyone will explain their reasons. Not everyone will give the courtesy of a proper ending. That's why closure has to come from within. It has to be a decision, a mindset, an acceptance that waiting for someone to explain themselves is giving them unnecessary power. When attachment is released, freedom follows. The freedom to stop overanalyzing, the freedom to move forward without waiting, the freedom to focus on what is actually within control. It's not about pretending it doesn't hurt, but about recognizing that pain is often created by holding on too tightly to what was never guaranteed in the first place. Nothing is owed. No one is obligated to act a certain way just because it was expected. People will do what they want to do, and trying to control that only leads to frustration. The problem with attachment is that it tricks the mind into thinking that letting go is losing, that if they are let go, they win, that if they stop mattering, they have power. But the real power is in detachment. The real power is in not needing them to text. The real power is in not letting their actions determine emotional stability. When there's no attachment to their response, there's no suffering. When there is no expectation for them to act a certain way, their silence loses its weight. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean suppressing feelings or pretending not to care. It means understanding that peace comes from within, not from an external source. It means realizing that happiness is not dependent on someone else's behavior. It means recognizing that true confidence is built on self-respect, not on whether or not someone decides to text back. When attachment is removed, clarity appears. The emotions that once felt overwhelming start to fade. The silence no longer feels like a punishment. It just becomes what it is, silence. And in that silence, there is an opportunity to redirect energy, to focus inward, to invest in what actually matters. Instead of waiting for a message, time can be spent improving, growing, evolving. Instead of analyzing their absence, energy can be used to build a life where their presence is no longer a necessity. Letting go of attachment is not about giving up, it's about gaining freedom. The freedom to stop overthinking, the freedom to stop waiting, the freedom to stop measuring worth based on whether or not someone texts first. It is about reclaiming control. It is about understanding that emotions should be dictated by personal choices, not by the unpredictable actions of someone else. When attachment is released, suffering ends. When suffering ends, peace begins. Self-worth should never be measured by someone else's actions. Yet it often happens without realizing it. When a text doesn't come, when the silence stretches longer than expected, the mind begins to whisper doubts. It starts to question value, wondering if maybe something was lacking, if maybe they lost interest because there was something wrong, if maybe they are choosing not to reach out because someone else has captured their attention. It's an easy trap to fall into this idea that another person's behavior is a direct reflection of worth. But this is one of the greatest lies the mind can tell. The truth is, someone's decision to text or not to text has nothing to do with value. It has everything to do with them, their priorities, their emotions, their distractions, their fears. But the mistake is in personalizing their silence, in assuming that because they didn't reach out, it must mean something negative about the self. That kind of thinking is dangerous. It places worth in the hands of another person, making self-esteem dependent on external validation. And when validation is external, it is unstable. It fluctuates based on how others respond. It rises when they show interest and crashes when they don't. But true confidence, true self-worth does not work that way. When self-worth is built from within, it is unshakable. It does not crumble when someone doesn't call. It does not diminish when attention is withdrawn. It does not depend on whether someone else recognizes value because that recognition is already there. The problem is, most people are conditioned to seek validation externally. From an early age, worth is often measured by approval, by praise, by attention, by acknowledgement. The mind becomes wired to associate feeling good with being chosen, with being noticed, with being wanted. And when that external source of validation disappears, it feels like something is missing. But nothing is missing. Nothing was ever missing. The silence of another person does not take anything away. It does not make someone less worthy, less valuable, or less important. The only thing it does is reveal their priorities, their choices, their level of emotional maturity. But it does not define the person on the receiving end. That power only belongs to the individual. The moment self-worth is placed in someone else's hands, it is given away freely, leaving emotions at the mercy of their actions. And that is a dangerous place to be, constantly waiting, constantly seeking, constantly measuring what based on how someone else responds. There is strength in knowing value without needing it to be confirmed. There is power in standing firm in confidence, regardless of who chooses to acknowledge it. There is freedom in realizing that worth is not something that fluctuates with someone's attention. It is constant. It is unchanging. But it has to be recognized from within. No text, no compliment, no validation from another person can replace true self-worth. And the moment that truth is embraced, everything changes. The silence no longer feels like rejection. It no longer feels like something missing. It simply becomes what it is, someone else's decision, separate from personal value. People who know their worth do not chase. They do not beg for attention. They do not measure their importance by whether or not someone reaches out. They understand that they are the prize, that their presence is a privilege, that they do not need to convince anyone of their value. They do not allow silence to shake them because they are already full within themselves. Their confidence is not fragile. It does not shatter under the weight of someone's absence. It remains unbothered, unmoved, unwavering. The key to reaching that level of confidence is self-acceptance. It is about embracing every part of the self, flaws included, without needing external approval. It is about recognizing strengths, appreciating uniqueness, and understanding that worth is not something given by another person. It is something that exists inherently. But this kind of confidence requires work. It requires breaking free from old patterns of seeking validation. It requires challenging the belief that being wanted equals being valuable. It requires unlearning the need for approval and replacing it with self-certainty. The moment self-worth is no longer dependent on another person, everything shifts. There is no longer anxiety about why they haven't texted. There is no longer desperation for them to reach out. There is no longer a feeling of being less than because they chose to remain silent. Instead, there is peace. There is certainty. There is a deep understanding that their choices are theirs alone and that their silence does not take anything away. This is the mindset of people who stand strong in their worth. They do not let others dictate their emotional state. They do not shrink themselves to fit someone's expectations. They do not sit in self-doubt, wondering if they are good enough. They know they are. They do not need reminders. They do not need constant reassurance. Their worth is solid. And because of that, they carry themselves differently. Their energy is different. And that energy is magnetic. It draws the right people in while naturally repelling those who are not meant to stay. People who do not recognize their own worth often find themselves in a cycle of chasing validation. They overextend, they overthink, they give too much to people who do not appreciate them, all in the hopes of being seen, of being chosen, of being valued. But that is not the path to real confidence. Real confidence comes from standing firm, from knowing that the right people will recognize value without needing to be convinced. It comes from understanding that those who do not see it are simply not meant to be part of the journey. When this level of self-worth is reached, silence is no longer feared. It is not taken personally. It is not seen as a loss. It is simply information about where someone stands, about what they prioritize, about how they operate. And that information is valuable because it helps in making choices from a place of confidence rather than insecurity. It helps in knowing when to walk away, when to stop waiting, when to shift focus back to what truly matters. True self-worth is a foundation. It is unbreakable. It does not waver based on whether or not a message is received. It does not need constant reassurance. It simply is. And when that truth is fully embraced, nothing, no silence, no rejection, no absence can take it away.